Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why you make the choices you do, especially when there is a risk involved? It is like that moment when you are deciding between two things, and you are not quite sure why you pick one over the other. Well, this new study dives deep into those silent internal debates. This research explores how we make decisions, especially when there is an element of risk, like choosing a lottery ticket. For centuries, scientists have tried to figure out what goes on in our heads. They've developed complex theories, but often these theories are just separate boxes that don't quite connect to how we actually think. One of the biggest challenges has been trying to understand the reasons behind our choices, not just the choices themselves. Think about it, most research and decision-making focuses on what you do, not necessarily why you do it. They look at your choices and try to guess your thinking process. But that is like trying to understand a conversation by only listening to one person and guessing what the other person is saying. It is incredibly difficult and inefficient. You need a lot of choices to be sure, and even then, you might miss important details. Researchers have tried to get more insight using fancy tools like eye tracking, but even those haven't fully revealed the why behind our risky decisions. A big part of the problem is that scientists often assume everyone thinks the same way, or that our thinking process stays the same in every situation. But we know that is not true. Think about how a child might make a decision differently than an adult, or how you might choose something different when you are stressed versus when you are relaxed. These assumptions of sameness or invariance can hide the real complexity of how we decide things. The researchers in this study suspect that these differences are not just minor variations, but are actually crucial for understanding human decision-making. So they thought, what if we could actually ask people why they made a choice and trust their answers? That is where verbal reports come in. Asking people to explain their thinking process during or after a decision can give us a much clearer picture, but analyzing all those spoken or written explanations has always been too hard to do on a large scale. Until now, that is. This is where the incredible power of large language models or LLMs comes into play. These are the AI systems, like the one I'm using to talk to you, that can understand and generate human language with amazing accuracy. The researchers here used LLMs to automatically sift through people's explanations for their choices. They created a list of potential decision reasons, basically common ways people justify their choices. Like, I wanted the higher payoff, or I picked the option with a better chance of winning. They then tested if the LLM could accurately match these reasons to what people actually wrote in their reports. And guess what? It worked incredibly well. The LLM was able to identify the stated reasons from people's free text explanations. And those reasons aligned with the actual choices people made in over 92% of the cases. That is a huge win for understanding how people think. Here's a simple way to think about their process. First, they defined what a decision reason looks like, both in words and as a formal rule. For example, the maximum outcome reason means looking at the biggest possible payout in each lottery and picking the one with the higher maximum. Then they had actual people make choices between different lottery options and write down why they chose what they did. Next, they fed these explanations to the LLM and asked it to find which of the predefined reasons best fit what the person wrote. Finally, they checked if the reasons the LLM found actually matched the choices people made. Before diving into what people said, they first tested if the LLMs were smart enough to understand the decision problems and the reasons themselves. They presented the LLM with different lottery choices and a specific reason, then asked it to predict which lottery the reason would prefer. They tested a bunch of different LLMs, and some of them, like Llama 3.3 -70b, got it right over 95% of the time. This showed that LLMs are really good at this kind of task. With that confidence, they moved on to the real deal, analyzing the participants' own words. They had 86 people make decisions 20 times each, and then explain their thinking. These explanations were short, often just a couple of sentences. The LLM then went through each of these explanations, looking for those specific decision reasons. To check how good the LLM was, they compared the reasons it identified to the actual choices people made. When the LLM said a certain reason was used, it was more likely that the choice made by the person matched what that reason would predict. They found that, by setting a confidence level, they could achieve over 92% accuracy in predicting choices based on the reasons identified by the LLM. This is amazing because it means the LLM is not just guessing, it is really picking up on the underlying thought processes. So, what reasons did people use the most? The study found that people often relied on reasons that suggested they were being cautious or trying to play it safe. They looked for ways to increase the chance of winning, make sure they didn't lose too much, or guarantee a certain outcome. It seems like in these situations, people weren't necessarily chasing the biggest possible win, but rather trying to secure a good outcome. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and challenges old assumptions. The researchers found that how people made decisions wasn't just about their personality or who they were as individuals. Instead, the type of choice problem itself heavily influenced which reasons people used. They created these cool visualizations like maps to show how people's reasoning patterns clustered together, and how the problems also clustered based on the reasons people used for them. What they discovered is that the structure of the problem, like whether it offered a safe option or had very similar probabilities, played a bigger role in shaping decision reasons than individual differences. This is a big deal because it means our decision making isn't fixed, it adapts very strongly to the situation. To really drive this point home, they did another test. They built a model that predicted people's choices based on the reasons people used for different types of problems. This model, which focused on the problem structure, actually outperformed prospect theory, a major established theory in decision science in predicting choices. This is a significant finding. It suggests that understanding the context of the decision problem is more important than we previously thought. So, what does all this mean? It means that the way we think about decision making has been missing a crucial piece of the puzzle: the articulate reasons and the context. Verbal reports, once seen as unreliable, are proving to be incredibly valuable data, especially when analyzed with powerful tools like LLMs. This research shows that our decision strategies are not static, but are flexible and adapt to the specific situation we're in. This opens up a whole new way to build models of human decision, making models that are more psychologically realistic and take into account the rich context of our choices. Instead of assuming everyone thinks the same, we can now start to understand how and why people shift their strategies based on the problem at hand. Of course, like any study, this one has its limitations. They use a specific set of the 20th of December-ish problems, which might not cover every possible scenario out there. Also, the participants were German speakers, so it would be interesting to see if these patterns hold true in other cultures. And as with any study asking people to explain their thoughts, the act of explaining might subtly change how they think, but the overall message is powerful. This research shows us that talk is indeed not cheap. Our words and explanations are rich sources of information about our decision making. And with the help of AI like LLMs, we can now unlock that information on a massive scale. It challenges the old ideas that decision making is always the same for everyone and in every situation. Instead, it tells us our decisions are often a dynamic dance with the context we're in. This research really highlights how crucial context is and how our reasoning can be much more flexible than we give ourselves credit for. It is a fascinating glimpse into the intricate workings of the human mind. So, what are your thoughts on this? Do you find that the situation you are in drastically changes how you make decisions? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into decision science and learned something new, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into how our minds work, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.